Fact or fiction? Imagine seeing yourself so closely in a story, you think it's your own autobiography. And that's exactly the conversation that we had on this week's episode of the Tando Book Club with Dr. Alex Marufu. A successful entrepreneur in the tech space, he shared his book choice and why he chose it. Thanks to Akello Digital Library, we can go beyond the pages. Dr. Marufu, it's such a pleasure to have you here on the Tando Book Club with us, discussing your book choice and themes and all of that good stuff. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, let's get into your book choice. Which book did you choose and why?
I feel put on the spot that I was asked to choose a book. I'm not sure if I read as much as I should.
Okay.
I chose Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga.
Classic.
Yeah, very much a classic book and one that really, really fascinates me.
All right, let's delve into why you chose the book. Why does it fascinate you?
There's a number of reasons why I find it fascinating. I think the first is the similarities between the story, especially the main character in the book, similarities between her life and my life.
Okay.
A sense of familiarity with the characters. I kind of recognize a lot of my relatives in the characters that are in the book. And then a lot of parallels between what happens in the book and what's actually happened in my life, in my family, around the things that have happened around me. So quite a few things that I identify with in the book.
Okay, let's start there. Pick one thing you identify with.
Okay, let's talk about similarities in the life story. A large part of the book, right, is about a girl that's in the rural areas.
Yes.
That gets plucked out of the rural areas and is taken to live with her uncle. And then her life develops from that.
Yeah.
When I was very young, my mother died when I was 11, 12, I think.
Sorry to hear that.
And my father died like 2-3 years later.
Okay.
But just before my father died, we moved to the rural areas. Because my father lost his job or he left his job. I'm too young. I was too young to remember what happened. And we went to live in the rural areas.
Okay.
I lived there for about 2 terms. And at the end of that, my brother came and he asked me to come and live with him in Blawayo. So I actually had to catch a bus. So he came in and asked for me to move. But I only moved like a couple of weeks later.
Okay.
And I moved across, and I remember everything that I owned was in a plastic bag. I probably had a toothbrush and maybe an extra shirt in there. But that was everything that I owned that I've moved with. So starting a new life in Bulawayo, they have to buy clothes for me. They have to buy shoes for me. And I kind of relate that to what's in the book. When I listen to Tambu describing her experience as she moves to the mission for the first time, I related with that. It was exactly what had happened to me years earlier on.
Okay, so first thing that comes to mind for me is, what were you feeling? Were you excited? Were you nervous? Were you scared? Did you have a sense that your life was going to change?
I think it's hard to think about what's going to happen so far into the future. There's the nervousness of, I was traveling by bus by myself. There's the nervousness of, am I going to get there? Am I going to be okay?
Yeah. Sorry, how old were you again traveling?
I would have been about 13, maybe 13 going on to 14.
Yeah.
I would have been. But I was traveling by myself. I get this sense that I didn't have the same sense of reflection that's reflected in the book.
Yes.
In that Tambu is very mature in her recollection, in her reflection of things that were happening around her. I reread the book in the last 2 weeks when I was thinking about this particular discussion.
Yeah.
And I started reflecting and thinking, I wonder how much my sister, who I left behind, felt about me being picked out and being the one that was going to go and live this new life. I had a sister and I had a young brother that I left behind. I don't remember actually reflecting much about that. There's an element of the story in that quite soon after I left, and this is during the war, my father was shot and killed together with my young sister and my stepmom, because my father had remarried at that time. And in rereading the book in the last 2 weeks, I started reflecting and thinking back, and feeling a little bit of guilt about the people that I left behind and what subsequently happened after I'd left. But the link between the book really is the similarity of that transition from my old life into a new life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those moments that you've shared. I'm sure you can tell from my reaction. I'm also imagining a 13-year-old version of you getting on the bus and then grappling with these changes. I think Tsitsi was deliberate in using the character to sort of bring out the experiences and to articulate them. But obviously, as a young man, as a young person, that's not where your mind
You're
would
in the
have been
moment.
at.
You're living the moment, and again, it's a very interesting comparison if you read the book, and this is much later in the book, right? There's a comparison between Nyasha, who, having spent time in England, having been more exposed, having read a lot more, she was able to reflect more on things than Tambo herself admits to having had the ability to do. That is something that developed a lot later in her life. And it's the same with me, that that ability to reflect on things came a lot later in life. At that time, I think I was in survival mode.
I was just about to ask.
I needed to get from this to the next thing, next part of my life, and didn't really devote that much time to reflecting on my surrounds and on the people around me.
Okay, so how did it feel, I guess, seeing so much of yourself so vividly portrayed, but in this book? It's not you who's writing the book, because you also said you could recognize family members.
Right, okay.
In the book as well.
Yeah. So I say there's three things, right? So the similarity of the story and my story in some sense, and then the familiarity of the characters. Literally all the characters in the book, I can name a person in my family. I know who Baba Mkuru is. I know who Jeremiah is. I know who my guru is. Some of them are composite characters in that I see a little bit of this character, this relative. I see a little bit of my wife in this person.
Okay.
And the other thing is that our characters are also evolving. I see myself as Tambo at one part of the book, and I see myself, a later part of me, as being Babam Guru or as being a different person. So I think we're on a journey, but I do recognize all the characters in the book as people that are in my family. I think that's the second element. The third element is I see parallels between stories that are in the book and stories of people around me. One of the main ones right at the beginning is Tambo is made to stay at home while Namo goes to school. And there's one set of twins in my family, a boy and a girl, and my parents had to make the same choice, and the boy was sent to school. And the girl actually stayed at home for a couple of years before she actually then was sent to school. But it was very clear that the girl was a lot more intelligent than the boy was. But a choice was made up front that the boy is the one that's going to go to school. The girl is going to be married to someone else. Exactly the same explanation that's given in the book. So I also see those parallels of those kind of things having happened in my life or in my family.
Interesting. And just to maybe fast forward to when you can now resonate with the Bamliki. Does this mean that you are finding, maybe younger family members to take to school, or what is the connection maybe that you have, or maybe it's something else altogether?
No, it was that was the connection, right? That I've taken. I don't know how many people I've taken through to university, and I see that bit as being the Baba Mkuru. But when I read through the book and I go towards the end of the book, the real character of Baba Mkuru comes in. And I know we're going to talk about the different themes. The patriarchy comes in.
Yeah.
And his role in that system that he's perpetuating in the negative aspects,
Yes.
aspects of it. And I actually started questioning myself, do I have some of those characteristics myself? They're quite negative, what comes out. And it's very positive right at the beginning in terms of the role that is playing in building the family. But towards the end, the negatives actually start coming up, and I question myself, do I have some of that characteristics? And I haven't really thought so much about it.
Just out of curiosity, like which characteristic?
Well, okay, towards the end of the book, there's a big segment where Baba Mkuru's real character comes along. Very misogynistic characters, characteristics that come out, the way he treats his daughter, the way he treats his wife, up front in the book.
Yeah.
She's very silent about it, but it becomes very obvious that this is kind of character that he is towards the end of the book.
So you were questioning to say, do I have those?
Do I have those characteristics, but I haven't really thought about it. That maybe other people around me recognize that, this is that characteristic, but I haven't really thought about it. You know, when you think about doing things and you think you're doing the right things, you're doing it from the bottom of your heart, right? But there's negative components of it that you may not realize are actually being seen by other people.
Okay, since we sort of flowed into the topic of patriarchy, I think maybe that's a theme I'd like to ask you about. If somehow the book helped you maybe question what patriarchy is, if there are elements of it in your life that you recognize, or just as you said, in yourself, or if you could see it in others, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I can just take a step back, right? You asked a question about the themes in the book.
Yeah.
And I tried to apply my mind to it. It's not something that I had done at the beginning. When I reread the book, I obviously thought about it. There's two main themes in the book.
Okay.
And I'll try and talk about those two, because within each there's two sub-components. The one is patriarchy, and the book is about patriarchy. A large part of it is about this big head of the family who's gone out, he's become successful, and he's come out, he's helped, and he makes it very clear that he's the head of the family.
Even while there's an actual father.
Exactly.
Yes.
He makes it clear that I'm the head of the family, not just my family, but also your family as well, because I'm the eldest. The wife, who's just as educated as he is, actually keeps very silent. And I must tell a side story here. I've met Tsitsi once.
Yeah.
And the reason why I met her is because my daughter, who also read the book, commented that, this author made my guru so powerless. So I actually bought the follow-up book and I got Tsitsi to sign, and she wrote some notes for my daughter. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it when I was preparing for this. But that's part of the patriarchy, right? In that my guru was made so powerless. In the family, she was so subservient to her husband, who was the head of the family, and that theme of patriarchy actually goes through the book.
Yeah.
It's not just Baba Mkuru, right? He's obviously the most visible.
Yes.
But Jeremiah, when Baba Mkuru is not there, he's really the man around the house, the way he bullies, and his wife also just sits there and says, what can I say in this? What can I do? And that theme is drawn throughout the book.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main theme of the book, right? But if you look closely at the book and the events in the book, misogyny is a big part of the book.
Yeah.
And misogyny and patriarchy are very close cousins, right? Except the one is the strong-armed brother who enforces patriarchy.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if people actually sees this, right? That misogyny is used to actually enforce patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at events within the book, and there's various events that you can pick. Right at the book, there's Namo who's fighting his young sister because he's helped himself to the maize that she's grown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because that's what he's been brought up to do.
Yes, there are structures
That
in
he's the
place
man.
to make him
He's the
feel
one,
entitled.
He was the one that was sent to school. He's entitled to what this girl has grown. We see it now as misogyny, but at the time it was an accepted part of what patriarchy is. Later in the book, and this is really a culmination of it, right? The father is fighting with the daughter and saying, I have a right to punish her, she's my daughter, and a very violent enforcement of patriarchy. And the only reason why she's being punished, if you think about it, is because she's not falling in line.
Yes,
what's expected of her is that you're going to become a good wife, you're going to get married, and so I think that's one very strong theme that goes through the book, the one of patriarchy. The other theme in the book is one of colonialism.
Yeah.
And the cousin of colonialism is racism. And I find the parallels quite fascinating between the two. And I'm not sure if Tsitsi intended it that way, right? You've got patriarchy and misogyny on the one side, but on the other side, you've got colonialism and racism. So the racism that is there is very subtle, but really it's what's used to enforce the colonialism. The way people are moved from one place to other, the way people are separated in terms of the way they live. And I was quite fascinated to see those two themes and the two cousins on either side of the theme and how they kind of are brought through in the book. Racism enforcing colonialism, misogyny enforcing patriarchy in the book.
I think they're both forms, obviously, of extreme oppression.
Right.
And as a young Black girl, you're going to have to contend with both of them. So I think the way that it came through the character is important to bring it both out. Yeah. But in a sense, you can't have colonialism without racism. You have to find a way to justify why you are saying someone is less than you. True. So I think the fact that it comes out was important. And for this character to wrap their head around all of this oppression that's going on around them, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. And I'm wondering, because you mentioned how your daughter made these comments, and then that propelled you to go and seek Tsitsi out. and you mentioned before that she was gracious enough to address the issues, which is very cool. But how much did your daughter's perception of the story also maybe change a little bit or impact your understanding of the book?
I don't know. I think I picked up the fact that my guru is such a weak character in the book, and I thought, look, it's really just part of a story. I think my daughter, I like to compare with Nyasha in the book. In a sense, she's got a very similar upbringing. She's someone that started reading very widely when she was very young. Obviously must have applied her mind to it a lot more than I did at the time when she read the book. And that's the one thing that she picked up. I mean, she didn't talk about patriarchy, but she says, but why did she make this character so weak that she couldn't stand up to her husband, despite the fact that she was just as educated as the husband was.
Oh, okay. No, fair enough. How old was she when she read the book?
Gosh, she's probably 15, 16, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that would explain.
Yeah, she would have been about 15, 16.
All right.
Yeah.
So going back to, I think this theme of patriarchy, I think it's interesting to me because you're a father, you're a man, in African society, obviously, in Zimbabwe, and your experience of it will be different. The way the system was set up was obviously for you to benefit versus me. But you've obviously got observations that you've made about this? I know you said misogyny and things like that, but I'm just curious about kind of maybe your experience with it.
I think it's a society that we've been brought up in. I think there's elements of it that remain, even in today's families. Again, going back to the parallels, my wife, I like to think my wife is a lot more intelligent than I am. She's got 4 degrees, she's got 3 master's degrees. But people don't seem to recognize that. They seem to recognize my achievements more than they recognize my wife's achievements. And it's part of that patriarchal society. And it's the same in the job. I don't know if my wife would have been as successful as I have been in business if she had tried to. But I think it's because of the society that that we're in. So yes, that patriarchal society is very much still alive. It's probably not as violently enforced as the book suggests, but it's very much there. And the reason why I think it's not seen as so much of a problem is that we've all grown up with it. I suspect, right, it's going to be very different with my daughter. If she was asking at the age of 16, my daughter is 23 now, if she was asking at the age of 16, those kind of questions, obviously she's grown up questioning the whole structure that people my age may not question as much, may have accepted that, yes, this is the way things are.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Okay, so in one of the things about the book that I like is the contrast between, let's say, class in a sense, right? So you've got one coming from the rural areas and then getting into this scenario, and there's a whole culture shock and a whole different understanding and a learning and sort of expectations around, you know, what you think wealthy people do or how they live or how you're supposed to live. And I wonder what your sort of impression was that as someone who kind of had a similar journey. Does the question make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I'm just reflecting on it, right? Because I think certain things, as you're coming up, you accept certain things as they are.
Right.
And it's very much so in the book. If you look at Tambu, right, when she was in the rear area, she accepted that this was life. That's what life was supposed to be. It's only when you look back and say, hang about, but actually there was a different kind of life that I could have lived, because you become a bit more exposed. And I think it's been the same with me. I didn't question so much. I did mention earlier on that I lived in the rural areas for about 8 months, I think, because after my father had lost his job, we lived in the rural area. So in a sense, I had some kind of comparison of a different kind of life. But it was like the township life and the life in the rural areas. And I moved to Bulawayo and I started experiencing a totally different kind of life. And I've traveled the world since, and I've experienced other things. But I think when you're in the moment where you are, you accept that this is life. This is the way it is. It's only when you then move on that you can look back and you can compare.
What do you compare looking back?
Just the general lifestyle, living, the diet that you had, the everyday things that you experience. And I think those are the things that you compare the most. And in a sense, the relationship between people as well. You kind of start comparing that. The way it was before and how it is after. I must say that when my parents, before my mother died, my parents were very close. They had a very close relationship. I always say to people that I never, or maybe I was too young, I have no recollection of my mother and my father fighting. If they did so somewhere where we didn't see. one of the recollections I have, if you ever ask my mother anything and ask my father, you'd get exactly the same answer.
Okay.
You'd get exactly the same answer. It didn't matter whether they were both there or they were not. If you ask them, so there must have been a lot more to their relationship than I came across later in life. It's something that I've always looked back and admired, the kind of relationship that that my father and mother had back then. After my mother died, my father remarried, and he had a nightmare of a relationship.
Oh dear.
He married a much younger woman than he was. There were all sorts of disagreements between them. They only married for about a year or so before they were both killed. But they had a very difficult relationship when I compare it with the relationship that my mother and my father had had.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just wondering, what, I don't know, what can I say, seeds that planted maybe unconsciously for your life moving forward. I think you probably had a very clear idea of what you wanted or hoped your future relationships would look like.
So the Baba Mkuru in my story is actually my older brother. So my brother was like 18 years older than me. People thought he was my dad.
Okay.
They actually thought he was my dad. I lived with his kids who were about my age. So
so
people thought he was my dad.
Okay.
But he was actually my brother. When I look back, I think that time kind of shaped me more than my parents had, because I lived with my parents when I was very young.
Quite a brief time.
And I lived with my brother in the really formative years of my life, between let's say 13 to 19 is when I lived with my brother. And I think that had a much greater impact on me growing up than what my parents' relationship had.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. Okay. On that note, we're going to get into our segment where I just ask you some, few questions. It's our rapid fire segment. Nothing too heavy, nothing too hectic. It's just say the first thing that comes to mind.
I feel like I'm taking an exam, but anyway,
no, don't. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just an answer.
Cool.
All right. So when we come back, we're just going to have fun questions and hear what Dr. Marufu is going to say. Okay, so the first question I ask you for the segment is, if you could invite 3 authors to dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite?
Khalid Hussein. I don't know if you know who that is.
The kite runner.
The kite runner. I'd invite him. Petina Gapa. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yep.
Gosh, she's got such a sense of humor.
One more person.
Barack Obama. I'd really be fascinated to share his views on the world.
I like that combination of people. That's interesting. Okay. Khalid Hussein made me cry many times. So
yes. His writing is very heavy.
Yeah.
It can get very heavy. I think it comes from the heart. A lot of it is based on his experiences when he was younger in Afghanistan. So it's a very good writer. I love him.
Yeah. What's the first book you remember reading?
Oh gosh, it should have been an Enid Blyton or one of those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a popular one.
I don't remember reading anything before that. I remember quite early when I was like in grade 4, I won a prize. I was quite clever then. I won a prize and I got a book, but I don't remember what the name of the book. It was a science fiction book. One of
Okay. What's your favorite type of book to read in the morning?
That's really, I don't think I ever quite read in the morning. I kind of look at like financial news and that's what I typically read in the morning. If I were to read fiction, it would be like towards the end of the day just to help me relax.
Is fiction your favorite type of book to read?
Yes, but I don't do as much of it as I should. I don't read as much outside my technical field as much as I should, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But if it's fiction, I like thrillers. Yeah, those are the kind of books. I probably wrote 50% of everything that Agatha Christie wrote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a big fan. Okay.
I have. I think I've got maybe a collection of 10 of her books in my house.
All right.
Yeah.
Which character from a book would you like to befriend and why?
Gosh, that's a difficult one. I have to dig deep. If it was this book specifically, maybe Baba Mkuru.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
You'd befriend him?
I'd befriend him. No, actually, I take that back. I take that back.
Okay.
I'd befriend Lucia.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know who Lucia is, but Lucia is Tambudzai's mother has got a young sister who's unmarried, who comes to live with them. And she's the one that starts to rebel against the patriarchy in the family. She's an educated woman. At the end of the book, she's just completed her grade 1 and she's written her exams, and they've promoted her to grade 3. She's a woman that's in her 30s or 40s, but decides, I'm going to go back to school.
Yes.
And once she goes back to school, she starts waking up and she starts asking questions. And she makes a very interesting comment in the book, right, that before she doesn't use those words, but she didn't have the framework for thinking fast.
Okay.
And I never thought about that the reason why some people can think fast, right, is they've got frameworks in their minds where they plug things into blocks and they get answers.
Right.
And she makes that observation that before she'd gone to school, she kind of didn't have this framework that other people have. So everything that she was processing was being processed from first principles. So it's not that she wasn't capable of getting to the answers, but that she didn't have the tools that allowed her to get to the answers, very quickly.
So okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a character that I would be interested in meeting.
Okay. You have to leave the country to write your book. Which country are you going to and why?
I'll probably go to Swaziland. There's some golf courses there. I can play golf. It's slow. It's not fast moving. Yeah, I'll probably go to Swaziland. It's not too far from home. I'm not a second-class citizen there. Yeah, I'd go to Swaziland.
Okay, sounds good. When you're feeling down, which book do you go to?
I listen to music more than books.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably listen to Leonard Cohen, but I know you've never heard of him.
Wait, he's American?
He's Canadian.
He's Canadian.
Yeah, he's
Is it like country type of?
Well, it's very slow. It's very different kind of music. I don't even know how to classify it.
Like I've heard that name before.
You've heard one of his songs called Hallelujah.
Oh,
guy
okay.
that wrote that song, yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'd listen to, I think, if I'm feeling down. Or maybe Van Morrison. So it's more music than a book.
So gun to your head, you have to choose a book.
If I had to choose a book, I would want something that would take me very far out of the present.
Proper escape.
Yeah, proper escape. One of the authors that takes a very different view on life is a Jewish writer called Yuval Noah. I cannot think of the names of his books. But he's got a series of books. I get buried in those. They're always very thick books. He's a philosopher.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense for you.
That makes sense. That's what I would, yeah.
All right. And the last one. If you had to come up with the name of your autobiography, what would it be?
Here we go again.
Why are you saying that?
That's what you
Someone
told me.
asked you.
No, it's just that just
Oh,
came
is
to
that
my
the
mind.
name?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Okay. And are we going to get an autobiography from you? Because what you've shared, your life sounds very, very
Look,
interesting.
like I've said, I've written. My kids keep saying you should write a book. You
I'm
should
with
write.
them.
Other than my three kids, I'm not sure who else will want to read it. But I've written chapter 1, like I said. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're looking forward to it. And you can come and debut it on our book club.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
can do a whole thing. Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. All right. Moving into our next segment. You're just going to pick a quote or two from the book and then share why you've picked the quote.
Okay.
All right.
I
So
wish you'd mentioned this before because I'd have marked it. I do have a quote that I would have wanted to.
mention it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can look for it, or you
No,
don't
it'll
have
take
to
me a
do.
long time, but I'll tell you what it's about.
Okay.
And it's one thing that fascinated me about the book. And there's a section in the book when Tambo has moved and she's gone to the mission. So quite early in the book, Tambo raises money to go to school and she goes to town to sell some maize. And there's an old wrinkled white woman who gives her money, pays for her to go to school. And that's her first interaction with a white person. And in her mind, that's what white people are. It was this woman and her husband, two old white people that are walking by. And she doesn't have any connection with white people.
Yeah.
She then goes to the mission and she starts interacting with white people. And she says, as she interacted with the white people that were obviously younger, she starts appreciating them. She says, I looked at these white people and I started realizing that some of them were beautiful. In fact, they were almost as beautiful as we are. I thought that was very profound.
Yeah. Actually, I like the quote. Okay, I have my thoughts on it, but why did you find it profound? Why did it stick out to you?
Because we've been, and this is colonialism, right? We've been ingrained to think that we've got inferior looks, we're inferior in so many ways to white people. And this was a 13 or 14-year-old girl who had accepted herself enough to say, yeah, maybe this person is almost as beautiful as I am.
And it's so innocently said, right?
It's so
such a pure observation, right?
Yes, it was such a pure observation. That level of self-acceptance, I found, that kind of took me back.
Interesting. Did you have that kind of self-acceptance, or were you just kind of just focused on?
I was focused on getting my life through. I didn't really think, like I said, I didn't really reflect much on many things when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I think one of the pleasures that I've had of living to a ripe old age is that I've had time to reflect on things. A lot of my training, my first degree was in physics.
Okay.
And computer science. And I was very technical in nature. When I started doing my PhD, I started getting exposed to other things, to philosophy, and it gave me a chance to reflect a lot more on life than I'd done earlier in my life.
Interesting. Do you find like having children also helps you reflect?
Grandchildren does. I've got 2 grandchildren.
Oh,
and that helps me reflect a lot. Thank you. That helps me reflect a lot on a lot of things.
How do you reflect?
I think when I had kids, I was too busy trying to build a career.
Yeah.
And I watched the interaction between my son and his sons. And I think, you know what, I didn't really have time to
do this,
to do the kind of things that he does. He's gracious enough to say he's privileged. And I see a lot of other kids don't recognize privilege they have. But he says, look, I'm privileged in that I'm able to offer things to my kids and I don't have to work as hard to do that as you did, to provide what you provided for me.
That's a nice, I think
it's very
observation.
gracious that there is that line of thinking.
And how do you reflect? Do you keep a journal? Do you type? Do you play golf?
I play golf. I love playing golf. I do sit back and reflect. I don't write as many notes as I should. I do keep a bit of a journal on my computer. I don't write a physical journal. I keep notes. I've got a notepad called Everything, where I write everything that
comes to mind.
That comes to mind, that I need to spend.
I'm sure that's
apply
where
my mind to,
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure that's where all the notes for your book are. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marufu, for sharing your story. For me, the examples that you shared about your life really showed the parallels in the book. So I didn't know that until you were speaking to that. And I found it very powerful and very enriching. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
And that's the amazing thing about powerful stories like Nervous Conditions. We get to see ourselves in the stories and even reflect on our own lives. Thanks to Akelo Digital Library, that's exactly what we get to do for this season of the Tando Book Club. We're going beyond the pages, so make sure to tune in to next week's episode.